Hello and welcome, it's our Confessions podcast. That is what this is. A concise collection of terrible tales, including a breakfast brouhaha, a terrible teenage timing thing, some sisterly sins, and a gigawatt of gullible parenting. That would probably work better as a gigawatt of gullible parenting, depending on whether you're British or American. Here it all is, but would you forgive? The collective are hearing gathered, but the Mother Superior is wearing a leather jacket. How about that?
Well, is that why you were just pointing at me?
Yeah,
what's
it's a very rock and roll image for Mother Superior.
It goes very nicely with your hair as well.
With my pink hair?
Yeah.
Can I just say Matt's looking nice as well?
Hey! Am I?
In his Alan Hansen striped shirt.
What?
I'm surprised it hasn't got Nottingham Forest written all over it.
Well, why would it? But that would be the only football club you could think of at the time.
Yeah, well, I don't know anything about football. Who do you support, Bat?
Yeah, how long have you worked?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
It's not Nottingham Forest.
Isn't it?
Let's put it that way. No.
Doesn't Brian Clough manage them?
It's Liverpool.
Oh, okay. Oh, Liverpool. Okay, fine.
You didn't know that?
No.
No, I didn't. No.
Okay. Well, let's see where we go with tonight's tale. Should we just move on? It's from Gabby. Gabby, thank you very much indeed for tonight's tale. Just put your hand up, by the way, Mother Superior, if there's any stage you're not quite sure what's going on.
Is it a complicated one, then?
Well, no, I don't think so. But there's a little family tree that we draw at the beginning. So
Okay.
Gabby says, Father Simon, Forgiving Collective. So after hearing a recent confession about brothers and sisters squabbling, that I decided to send in this tale, which takes us back to when I was just 14 years old in the late 1980s. Now, I'm not saying I was an angel as a child, but my younger brother and sister, they're twins, nicknamed me Angel because they hated the way I got rewarded by our parents for good behaviour, and they knew it wound me up. There are 4 of us all together. My older brother Steve, me, and my younger brother Chris and sister Zoe. There's a 3-age gap between the lot of us. That's going to be a tired family. Saturday mornings, we usually spent at home while our parents walked down to the local village to do the weekly shop. As Steve always slept in on the weekends, my parents trusted me to keep the twins in check, because I was the responsible one. But every Saturday, as soon as our folks left the house, my brother would kick off. This is younger Chris, half the twins. This Saturday was no exception, except that Chris was being particularly obnoxious, very difficult, and horribly argumentative. He was even getting twin Zoe's nerves on, which meant he must have been on form because they usually attacked me together. He wouldn't do what I asked him. He was invading my personal space, and imagine that, and everything was met with a sarcastic comment and a smug grin. I kept my cool for as long as I could, until suddenly I snapped. I snapped big time. I wanted Chris out of my face, in capital letters, by the way. I grabbed him by his blue paisley 1980s flannelette pyjamas, opened the front door and threw him out, even though he wasn't wearing anything on his feet. I ran into the kitchen, quickly locked the back door because I wanted him to see the error of his ways. He'd pushed me too far, and I had to punish him. Well, I thought it was funny at first, continued the insults coming through, the shouting, the laughter through the letterbox. He still seemed to be very smug. By this time, Zoe had had quite enough. It's not working, she said. What else can we do to teach him a lesson? Well, suddenly I had an idea. Grabbing the nearest object to me, which happened to be a bucket, I filled it with cold water, then some orange squash, and then some flat fizzy lemon. I opened the door and chucked the entire contents over him. Then I shut the door, locked it as swiftly as I had opened it. My adrenaline was buzzing. I was enjoying this. And he had fallen silent. It had worked. My 11-year-old brother, frozen, soaked, had seen at last the error of his ways. I looked at my sister. She was gaping at me open-mouthed, not believing what I'd actually done. But we suddenly started laughing. In fact, we both fell into hysterics. Finally, some peace in the house. I walked into the kitchen, put the kettle on to make some tea. And then, I have to say, he started again, shouting through the letterbox, kicking the door, and generally making an awful racket. Sisters stink was the gist of what he was shouting. Water obviously wasn't enough, I thought. Now, both our parents were heavy smokers back then. We didn't know the dangers, not even of passive smoking, as they weren't as publicised as they are today. So I went round the house, emptying every single ashtray, and there were many, into the bucket. Many didn't look like they'd been emptied for several days and contained a volcano's worth of cigarette butts, ash and burnt-out matches. When I'd gathered a large amount of smoking-related debris together, I headed back downstairs. My brother was now getting even louder and making a considerable fuss up and down the street. This made me even more angry. I just needed to shut him up in capital letters again. I opened the door and I tipped the entire contents of the bucket on his head.
What?
He stood frozen to the spot, a cascade of deathly greyness pouring from his head. Days and days of used and stained filters, matches and fag ends stuck to his hair, went up his nose, and some went down his pyjamas. I think we left him outside for 15 minutes before we opened the door and allowed him back into the house, by which time he was somewhat subdued and in a sorry state. He smelt terrible. But when he'd had a bath and washed his hair, we made him some tea and toast to warm him up, because actually I'm quite a nice sister. Steve, by the way, slept through the whole incident. Typical teenage older brother. And Saturday mornings were far more tranquil because he never tried that ever again. Chris still hasn't forgiven me, and over the years has relayed this story to all of my boyfriends in an attempt to scare them away. So, dear collective, I throw myself at your feet. I don't seek Chris's forgiveness, as he deserved everything he got, but I am seeking forgiveness from the neighbours who inadvertently were subjected to a somewhat disturbing Saturday morning where an energetic, prepubescent 11-year-old persisted in being loud, arrogant and downright rude. Yours innocently, from Gabby, who I think is making far too much fuss about her younger brother, really, because we all know that younger brothers are perfectly lovely.
She said she was quite a nice sister and innocent. I can't understand it. I think this was completely over the top. I mean, was it winter? Because it also could have been quite dangerous.
Well, it's the bit where she says he invaded my personal space.
My personal space. No, well, that is actually. I agree with that. Personal space is very important.
Yeah, but she's 40,
you could just push
11.
him away and say, stop it, or go up to your room. You don't have to do that. The cigarette butts. And what's with the orange squash and the fizzy lemon? Don't get that. Anyway.
Makes it more fun to throw over your brother.
I suppose it's a bit sticky and disgusting. I would have been afraid that Chris would seek revenge at some point in the future. I think, yeah, it was a bit over the top, so for that reason, Gabby, you're not forgiven.
This brothers and sisters thing is quite a lucrative theme here.
It is, and we've all been there, haven't we, with all of our brothers? I mean, I bet you had big fights with your brothers, didn't you?
My younger brother is always delightful, apart from when he punched me in the back when he was 5.
Really? Why did he do that?
Well, he was 5.
Oh, okay.
That's all. That's
Is that the worst thing that ever happened to you with your siblings?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Well, my sister was always marvellous.
Really? Oh, you're just such a big creep, honestly.
Well, she sent me a text saying thanks for that last time I praised her on air. So.
I think this is awful, absolutely awful, if you can't control children by any other means than throwing old cigarette butts over them and sticky orange and lemonade. It's kind of verging on child abuse, really.
No, it's not. It's a 14-year-old sister.
Yeah, no, but you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't
quite
do
nice with a pile of ash on your head.
Well, yeah, some people say I look like that anyway. It's all verging on bullying as well, and I don't think that's very nice. So I think... Would you not do that, please? Would you not do that? Dear listener, he sits there crunching his knuckles.
So you're not forgiving?
I'm not forgiving you either for doing that. No, not forgiven, no.
Brother Matthew, what say you?
I was very much on Chris's side throughout this, because it is disgraceful to have cigarette butts tipped over you and then be left outside for however long it was whilst he's going up and down the street. But here's the point that I don't get. Why doesn't he seek any revenge other than... informing her future boyfriends, ooh, this is what she did to me when I was 11. Like any bloke is going to go, oh, right, in that case, it's off. Because you apparently tipped some orange juice over him when he was 11 and some cigarette butts were finished. That's not going to happen at all. Why didn't he just seek some kind of revenge himself? Not a real
Maybe
man,
he's
I would
still
suggest.
planning it.
Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. He's playing the long game, is he? Yeah, wait till she's 50 and then tip some cigarettes over her. Not going to happen. For that reason, I forgive you, because you managed to get away with it.
What do we get out of this? Well, obviously more brothers and sisters. I'm not sure I want any kind of fag ash based.
No.
Ashtray confessions.
Running up and down the street in your pyjamas, we'll have some of that.
Do you think?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, yeah, well, there could be some... I was still in my pyjama based. Okay, well, we'll see where we go with that. You can send us an email or you can go online. Every Saturday night basically has a moment on X Factor or one of those shows where you're expected to cry, doesn't it? Because they've got some... There was a big father-son thing a couple of weeks back and I started to go.
Did you?
Well, I only started. I stopped myself. I walked out the room. Obviously, I wanted to embarrass the children.
Good heavens. Are you crying at
And the Olympics.
Oh,
you
the
have to cry at the
Olympics,
Olympics, don't you?
I
They
can
always have
understand
those
that, yes. Yeah.
stories of triumph and adversity.
But you are a bit inscrutable
you
for a
think?
lot of the time, yes, you are.
Mind you, this morning I got the wrong... I told my son it was games day, he had to go in his games kit, and it wasn't.
Yeah, but did you cry? Or did he?
Well, no one cried, but obviously it's a little bit...
That's horribly embarrassing.
I know, very, very stupid, really. It's clearly Wednesday and Thursday games. I mean, how difficult is that to remember? Foolish boy. That's me, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, the music's running. What on earth are we talking about this for? So, tonight's story comes from M. Thank you, M. It's tonight's confession. The wheat of the moment. You'll see why. Dear Father Simon and the Council of Mercy, some years ago I was a sales manager for a company selling office-type business machines in the north of England. I had a really good team in the main, but one of them, H, was a pain in the proverbial. He was a little lazy. Okay, he was very lazy. He was unpunctual, scruffy, poor with his paperwork, late in doing his expenses, his company car was a tip, and I never quite knew where he went in his day-to-day work, if you see what I mean. He was, however, quite successful, which I always put down to his inherited sales territory. Frankly, a three-toed sloth with halitosis would have achieved good sales on his turf. In those days, I was a centre-forward with my local team, beginning to slow down, but still believing that Barcelona was secretly assessing my obvious goal-scoring talents. Calamity struck one day, however, when after heading the ball over the approaching goalkeeper, he took me out and dislocated my shoulder. As he took me out, he obviously just collided. He didn't go out on a date or anything.
Would have been a more interesting story, I think.
That would be another confession altogether. He took me out and dislocated my shoulder. The ensuing pain made the following days pretty grim. I couldn't drive, I couldn't work, which meant that H could be getting up to all kinds of mischief without anyone checking up on him. I wasn't sleeping because as soon as I turned onto my side to nod off, the agonising pain would kick in. By the following Saturday, I was, quite frankly, knackered. Finally, early on Sunday morning, sleep came to me. Bliss. What seemed like a fraction of a second later, 8 a.m. in the morning, the phone rang. It was H. He was sorry to bother me. He was just off out with the kids. He couldn't get his heated rear window of his company car working. Could I come and help? Good heavens. My language wasn't pretty, and he was told exactly where to go and what to do with his heated rear window. I slammed the phone down and returned to bed in an even grumpier mood. Just as I settled, the phone went again. Returning downstairs, I answered it to hear H say that he thought we'd been cut off and he hadn't heard what I was supposed to do with his rear windscreen. I very slowly and clearly told him that if he ever phoned me again at the weekend, I would put a size 9 up his proverbial, and I shut down the door. Slight overreaction, but he was a real pain. I slammed the phone down, annoyed, tried to get back to sleep, but I was in too much pain. A few months later, I attended our company's annual holiday. It was a scheme that they ran each year, and anyone over target at the end of the 12-month period was taken away for a few days on the company, with partners in tow, if you had one. On this particular year, we ended up taking 60 to 70 couples to a Spanish island, H and Mrs. H being one of them, who were fully ready to eat and drink at our expense. A couple of us didn't take partners, and we chummed along, mainly in a slightly alcoholic daze. On the next to last night, our revelry went on long into the night, and about 3 in the morning, as my boss and I drunkenly returned to our rooms, we passed the sleeping cabin of Mr. and Mrs. H. My chance to get even had arrived. On H's doorknob was his breakfast selection, together with the required time for delivery. Croissant and coffee for 2 at 9:30 is what he'd ordered. I returned to my room to find my own blank breakfast menu slip, and I then proceeded to order everything on the menu times 4. And I mean everything. I also added some extras, such as fried fish, squid,
chorizo,
and a couple of extra flavours, of yoghurt, all to be delivered at 6 a.m. sharp, and replaced H's order. Off to bed I went, very pleased with myself. The next day I shuffled down to the pool at about lunchtime and sat down on the only available sun lounger. From this position I heard Mrs. H telling another of our colleagues that they'd had a terrible night and that the hotel was a disgrace. Apparently at 6 o'clock sharp there was a loud knocking on the bedroom door, and before they had time to get out of bed it had opened. 6 waiters proceeded to bring in trays of croissant, Danish pastries, toast, white, brown and granary, jams, cheeses, cereals, every cereal you've ever seen, yoghurts, muesli, everything you could possibly think of. They were all shouting, "Desayuno, desayuno, senor," which means
here's your breakfast.
Chum. It transpired that the waiters were eventually ousted from the room. This meeting of minds wasn't over, and they returned at 7 a.m. and at 8 a.m. with exactly the same trays laden with even more food, before H gave in and allowed them to eventually serve breakfast for the multitude. Despite the bright sunshine causing my hangover to worsen, I had started to smile and was trying hard to suppress my mirth when the first tears of laughter started to roll down my face. Within seconds I was enveloped by fits of laughter, which was noted by Mrs. H. She marched over and in front of many colleagues and their partners said, "This was your doing, wasn't it?" I of course denied all knowledge and put it down to an overly enthusiastic kitchen. The incriminating breakfast order was found, it was expensive, and we all said we'd chip in, though I don't think actually anyone ever did. So I throw myself to the collective, not for forgiveness from Mr. and Mrs. H, as in my opinion, they brought it on themselves, but from the poor waiters, who were tramping up and down the stairs carrying heavy food trays for nearly 3 hours through no fault of their own. I must say, I've often seen those little breakfast slips and thought, no,
Been tempted, have you?
well, I've never done anything about it.
I bet you've ordered a taxi for somebody else in the middle of the
on
night.
a breakfast slip?
No!
Why would I order a taxi
know.
for someone in the middle of the
Similar
night?
kind of thing.
No, clearly it's the kind of thing that you're
No.
very familiar with.
It's not.
What do you think, Sister Rebecca?
I think this is a bit of an odd one. I mean, what was H doing, calling his boss, was it his boss, at the
Yes,
weekend
trying to work out how
at
to-
8
how
o'clock
to
in the
work a
morning?
heated rear
That's very,
windscreen.
very odd,
How
isn't it?
useless can you
I
be?
think there's something a bit strange about H. I think maybe a bit, I don't know. I don't think you can blame him, though, because obviously he wasn't thinking straight when he was doing that. I mean, why do you need a rear heated window anyway, so urgently?
Well, otherwise you can't see out of it.
Well,
you
I
would
know,
think,
but I mean,
if
it's
in
not gonna be-
trouble, try wiping
It's not
it.
going to be urgent,
Get
is
a
it,
cloth
at the
and wipe
weekend?
it.
But I also think that M could have just switched the phone off. If M wanted to sleep late in the morning, didn't have to answer the phone.
I think
It's
it was so
ridiculous.
long ago that you didn't have on and off switches on the
Maybe.
phone.
I just think the whole thing is very odd, but I think he went a bit over the top by filling in this slip. And also the waiters were a bit dumb, weren't they, to carry on bringing breakfast up for 4 people
That's
when
a
they were
dumb
clearly...
waiter.
Oh, well done.
Oh, dear.
Outstanding.
So I think the whole story strikes me as a bit odd, and I am not going to forgive you.
Sorry about that, Em.
Yeah, this is a tricky one because on the one hand, I think that was a bit of a good jape to, I've done it about 3 times in my life, ordered the breakfast, and it's a wonderful. I wish, I quite jealous of the fact that he had so much to eat because I would love that, and I'd love a lot of waiters in my room.
Nigel comes to you and cooks every Thursday. He uses
does.
your kitchen.
He leaves me a little something in the fridge, which is always very nice. What did he leave? Apple juice I got last week. Anyway,
Big deal.
It's,
He's really generous.
yes, he is but because I'm a bit conflicted about this because H sounds like a bit of a pain, and anybody who phones anybody up at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, there's something not quite right. I really like the prank, and it didn't do anybody any harm in the end, so I'm going to forgive.
Okay, well, it's 1-1.
Right, here's the other side to this story, and he reveals this right at the start, is that he's really jealous of H and his sales pitch. He's saying, basically, this guy has got a much better sales pitch and much better products, and that's why he's better than me. No, it's not. It's because he's a better salesman. No one wants to buy anything from M. Better get used to it, sunshine. No one likes you as a salesman. And so what H has done is said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to ring him up at 8 o'clock in the morning and say that I can't work my rear windscreen heater. And I'm going to do it again and again to wind this bloke up. And so, and M has completely fallen for it and responded with a pretty weak, lame, I'm going to fill in the breakfast thing and all the waiters are going to turn up. When all that happens is that basically this guy gets a lot of food and he gets all paid for because he's probably put it on the account anyway. So I say... not forgiven, because I can't work out where I am now. I'm like, yes, I am not forgiving.
All right.
Yes.
Do you think we get salesman? I think salesman confessions and weekends in Spain confessions. Oh, I don't know about that.
Yes, please.
Room service confessions.
Oh, yeah, there's going to be loads of them.
Plenty of those. I'm thinking of suggesting Matt for the next series of Strictly Come Dancing because
Yeah.
I think Dr. Mosh, with a few sequins, might
No, I can definitely see that happening.
might just be a little too
Yeah.
much for some
Yeah.
of the ladies
Ladies!
in the house. Okay, so the music's up and running. Here we go, another Drive Time confession. This is from Matt, but it's
Not me.
It's clearly well, as far as we're aware, we probably changed the name anyway.
Yeah.
So, dear Sam and the Collective, a writing to ask forgiveness for events that took place on a stage some 25 odd years ago, and I can only now bear to unburden myself of, as my old school has been demolished, to make way for a newfangled academy. What a good phrase, newfangled means. Is there any other type of fangled other than new? It's always newfangled, old-fangled, or middle-fangled, is it? It's always a newfangled. Anyway, I digress. Picture, if you will, the mid-80s. For unknown reasons, possibly hormonally related, a few anonymous friends and I joined the school theatre group. And on auditioning for various parts in what would have been our first play, The Wizard of Oz, were swiftly relegated to minor roles, trees, fauna and characters like that. It didn't quite make it into the film. The next production was Grease, and as the auditions proved we could neither sing nor act, we found ourselves as the male chorus. This group role involved being general stage fillers, as well as being backing vocals and dancers for the musical items. The nature of being in the male chorus meant that we were frequently required on stage, and so being practically minded, we began hanging around backstage. This behaviour annoyed the drama teacher no end, and one evening she finally lost her cool and told us in no uncertain terms not to come out until we were called. Well, we did precisely that. We were given, which given the tone with which we received our orders, this seemed like a very good idea. Time passed, and murmurings began amongst us. It had been a while since our last number. Surely we ought to be on stage by now. Still, the drama teacher had not asked us to leave the room, so here we stayed. These murmurings were shortly brought to a stunned silence as the teacher exploded through the door, and in language most unexpected from a teacher, we were asked where had we been and why weren't we on stage. 25 years has softened my memory, but I recall words that would make a docker blush. Perhaps the words, "Well, you told us to wait here," began to form on our lips, but one look at her face, and those words went unspoken. Here was someone with whom it truly was not wise to answer back. Needless to say, we ran from the dressing room only to screech to a halt. At stage right, the musical number we were required for had begun, and so we turned as one to the teacher who had virtually chased us onto the stage. Should we clamber around the back and enter from both sides? "I don't care, just get on the stage," came the reply, although perhaps with more swearing. And so it came to pass that the leads and female chorus, who had been singing "We Go Together," rather ironically, on their own, were joined by a red-faced male chorus who frantically had to work out where in the song and dance routine everyone else was so that we could catch up. So we were running on stage mid-number, trying to work out what was happening. The song goes, as you know, "We're one of a kind, like dibbity-dip, doobity-dop, a doobie-doo. Our names are signed boogity-boogity, boogity-boogity." At this point, we all stroll on nonchalantly and sort of sung "Shooby-doo-wop, shooby-doo-wop, chang-chang, changity-chang, shoo-bop. We'll always be like one, wah, 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 wah." This is kind of getting in the spirit.
This is coming to
of it,
life,
do you think?
yeah.
It's almost as if I was there, Simon.
Sandy and Denny were looking daggers at us. The audience were laughing at rather too heartily, really. Unfortunately, we made things worse when we got to the bit that goes "Ramalama diddy." Oh, hang on, we'll do it like this. This bit. Okay, we got to that bit.
I thought we did that rather well, team, don't you?
And we were all in complete hysterics. Shaking and uncontrollable, we managed to splurge the final line. If you want to join in, it's shoobop de wop de shibop, shananananananana yippity boom to boom. Oh, sorry, boogity 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 boom. Anyway, as you can imagine, we were all in complete yes. We were all in complete hysterics by this point. And Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta were very unhappy. So I beg for forgiveness from our teacher for our behaviour following the letter of the law as we did, from the female chorus for leaving them somewhat in the lurch, and lastly from all the mums and dads and siblings and any critics of the performing arts for the bad language which they undoubtedly heard during that evening's performance, plus our hysterics on stage. By way of atonement, the next play was a Greek tragedy, and my improved acting skills meant that I not only ended up with the longest speech in the play, which I can still remember, but also had to wear a toga, which fell down on stage mid-performance.
What I say?
Yours with fake grease paint stubble, Matt. Anyway, I always love the school plays, particularly there are so many of them. We had I remember we had at Worthing Sixth Form College, they had a production of, I'm sure it was King Lear, and the stage had filled with dead bodies by the end, as it does with Lear. And then one of the soldiers started to laugh hysterically, and of course they're all up against each other, and so these hysterics passed from one corpse to another. And by the end of this big, moving, dramatic moment, everyone was crying with laughter, which is
the audience loved it.
Not the way Lear is supposed to be. Anyway, Matt's tale is of a performance of Grease, with Ramalama Ding Dong and Dinkety Bop Shabop with various hysterics.
We did Grease at for our school play, and I can attest that it is difficult to keep a straight face during that song.
Yes,
because
were you Sandy?
The lyrics, I wasn't Sandy, I was one of her friends.
I bet you hated not being Sandy then.
No, I didn't at all.
If you're a head girl, you should have the right to choose the role.
Unsuited to be Sandy, to be honest. I was very happy being one of the chorus.
But Rebecca was singing along with the entire song.
well,
she
there you
knew
go.
every little syllable.
Yes.
I did know the words because we had to know the words because we were in the chorus. Anyway, so it brings me back. back. I think it was the teacher's fault because the teacher told them to stay backstage until they were called,
Yep.
and then they were never called. So I think there's just no doubt about this. And there's also no doubt that you cannot not laugh when you're doing that song. So I think, Matt, you are completely forgiven.
What do you say, Mother Superior?
Yeah, I'm not sure what I've got to be forgiving about, really, because as Rebecca's just said, it wasn't their fault. They thought they were in the wrong. Anyway, they managed to get on stage.
Fancy teachers using bad language. That
Do you know? I was thinking,
shocked
I've
about that.
never heard a teacher ever in the teaching situation use a bad word. Is that something that you've ever heard? I've never
Well, not
heard
in
it.
a class, they
no.
wouldn't know.
Well, that's almost the same thing, though, isn't it? So that wasn't very good. So for that reason and that reason alone, I forgive you because it really wasn't your fault.
I think school play oldies, Grease oldies, drama teacher oldies, togas.
Togas,
He's
oh
a
yes,
teacher. What do you
one slipping down.
what do you think,
I
Matt?
can't believe you had a go at me and Rebecca early in the show for the atomic thing, when your rendition of that particular Grease song was hardly leaping off the page.
Boogity, 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 boogity,
Shibbity ding dong,
Shabbat.
shalalalang.
I wasn't singing, though. I
No,
was
no,
just
no.
speaking.
That's well, neither were we. I love it when we get foul-mouthed teachers on. I think those are the best confessions. I think we had one years ago with teachers losing it. So I love that kind of stuff. And for that, I am going to definitely forgive.
We had Sweary Vicar. We had a Sweary Vicar. one.
Sweary Vicars, we had like a whole glut of Sweary Vicars. They were great. In fact, they're always guaranteed to get forgiven. If you've got a Sweary Vicar involved, we'll definitely forgive. So I'm going to forgive this time because of the Sweary teacher.
Okay, so teachers and amateur dramatics, school plays, Wizard of Oz, togas.
Oh
You
yeah,
name it, we'll take
togas.
it. Thank you very much indeed for all the confessions coming in. This one comes from Beth. Beth, thank you very much. Dear Drive Time Confessions Collective. That's you guys. I'm writing to beg your forgiveness for events that have occurred during the last month or so. Recently, my 11-month-old border collie called Balester has been having behavioural counselling as he's very nervous and shy of strangers, which can result in him biting anyone unknown if they dare to attempt to stroke him. The counsellor that has been advising us gave me a clicker, which is a small green plastic box which makes a clicking noise if pressed. That's why it's called a clicker. She told my partner and I not to let my son touch the box at all costs in case he used it excessively or incorrectly, or in other words used it as a toy for his amusement instead of a training tool for our beloved Pooch. A day or two after receiving the clicker, we were walking with my son, and every time my dog came back to me after sniffing anything, I pressed the box and gave him a treat. After 10 minutes or so of near enough constant clicking, my son noticed the noise. To start with, I tried to pass the noise off as a noise that I was making with my mouth, but it wouldn't wash with my son as I couldn't exactly replicate the noise myself. Then I said I could make the noise with my fingers, but that didn't work either, same problem. My son continued to question me about what this bizarre noise was, and was it coming out of the green plastic box I had in my hand. So, inventing stories as we walked along, I told my son that it was a special box for adults only. Further, that it would give any child who tried to use it an electric shock.
Great.
We're back in the lies you tell
Lie,
your
you
children,
kids.
which is a very kind of fertile soil for this. I then went on to explain that it had also given me a shock earlier in the day for using it wrongly. I told my gullible and impressionable 9-year-old that the box communicated with Balester's brain using dog waves, and it knew if he'd made a good decision. However, if the clicker was pressed when Balester hadn't made a good decision, it would emit an electric shock to whoever had pressed it. To my absolute amazement, my son lapped up my story and asked me what I had done to be shocked. At this point, I happened to look at my boyfriend, and his eyebrows were raised at the lengths I was going to, as my lie was now spiralling out of control. So I did what any mother would do, and I told my unsuspecting son that I had accidentally pressed the box when Balester hadn't made a good decision. He'd just been doing doggy things, and I'd pressed the button. The dog waves had communicated with his brain, and that realised that he was doing nothing wrong, and had bounced back to the box where they had turned it into 1.21 gigawatts of power. And a nasty shock for me. Does that ring a bell? 1.21 gigawatts of power? No?
No.
Back to the Future. It's a Back to the Future reference. So I explained to my son there were 1.2 gigawatts of power, and a nasty shock for me. Thankfully, he had no idea of how powerful a gigawatt is, as a large nuclear reactor generates 1 gigawatt, so therefore... is an awful lot of power. That was about a month ago, and last week my son asked me further questions about how the box knew if Belster had made a good decision, and I told him it had secret powers of telepathy and could tell what Belster was thinking. The dog waves surrounded his head and probed gently, and they formed a pattern of shapes which the box could interpret. The only real complication arose when my son asked me to deliberately make a mistake to show him how it gave me an electric shock, but I quickly told him that it was excruciatingly painful and I didn't want to go through that whole thing again. There are only so many gigawatts of shock that a grown woman can take, which is, of course, obviously true. I would like to beg forgiveness from the Drive Time Collective for the shocking lies I told my impressionable 9-year-old son and the possible future years of fear he may experience when seeing dog training clickers. Furthermore, I would like to apologise to the manufacturers of dog clickers for describing their product as being dangerous, and to accidental pressers of the clickers, because nothing bad happens. However, in my defence, the trainer had told me to not allow my son to touch the clicker under any circumstances, and I was determined to obey his rules at all costs. Well, we've already established that telling lies to kids is extremely popular with many people if it means that at the end of it you get a more peaceful day. But what do you think about this one, Sister Rebecca?
I don't really understand why Beth went through this whole charade, because she could have just said to her son when he said, "Can I play with your clicker?" She could have just said, "No, you're not supposed to. The vet told me you're not allowed to," and that would be the end of it.
Don't be so straightforward, woman.
Sorry, that's just my view.
But it's far more fun to say.
It is more fun, but
then
then you get into a little pickle, don't you? And then you worry about it for years, and then you have to write to Radio 2 and ask for forgiveness.
That's true.
I think it's not worth it, personally. So for that reason, Beth, I am not forgiving you.
That was just like a dragon's den, and for that reason...
I know.
What do you say, Mother Superior?
Do you know, it was so complicated, this confession, and I did
No,
have
it was actually very straightforward,
but
unless you nod off halfway through.
I didn't nod off, but I just found what the respondent did incredibly complicated, and I was having trouble. Especially me. Yes. I was having trouble following all the shifts and the turns and the changes of explanation. And if I found it complicated, then I'm not surprised that her little child found it complicated. Or maybe you'd like to disagree with that.
I don't think the child found it complicated. I think the child just spotted the error in his mother's story.
He must have been confused because she kept changing what the reason was that she was doing it for. Overcomplication, not really a problem, I don't think, and I think so. You know what? I do forgive you because I don't think it matters that much. But just don't.
Did you hear any of it, by the way?
I did.
Dog click, electric shock.
Yeah, I did.
Dog waves. Telepathy,
all
that.
I got that.
Okay,
I got that, but I thought her explanations were very complicated. As Rebecca said, if she just said, can I play with that, Mum? No, that would have been over and done with. So I'm going to forgive you because I don't think it's that important.
Brother Matthew?
Our production team have been busy this week, haven't they? We've had Grease last week and Back to the Future this week. There it is again. Well done. Great Scott, yes.
Is it gigawatt? Is it really gigawatt?
I think it's gigawatts.
I think
yeah.
We say gigawatts and they say gigawatts.
Really?
I think that's the way it is, yeah. Well, clearly.
Well, that's what he says, isn't it? Right. But along with exploiting toilets and sweary vicars, I always forgive when it involves lying to your kids. Lie to them and keep lying to them until they can find you out. So I'm definitely going to forgive.
One day, your son's going to lie to you.
He is. It's going to be a sad day.
And he'll say, because I learnt it.
Yes.
Does he listen to this show, man?
Yes, he does. And he also thinks I've got the morals of a sewer rat as well, frankly. So I think we're perfectly fine.
That was that. Let us know what you think. Send us your confession. More available next week as a podcast and live from Monday.
Thanks for listening to this BBC Radio 2 free download. Now, why not try more?
Jazz for me, I guess, is improvisation.
My pick of the best in rhythm and blues.
Music from Richard Thompson, Chris Wood and Pentangle, amongst many, many others.
All at the BBC Radio 2 website.